Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cool and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Afraid, the upcoming Jaw the Dragon. I am essentially done with Sonic Adventure 2. I'm on the last story. I have beaten the hero side and the dark side, and from what I understand, the last story is just like a handful of a gauntlet of stages that you have to play through in order to beat the true final boss. So essentially, I'll probably beat it the next week or so. So I figured I might as well, give my general thoughts, give a general review of what I think of Sonic Adventure. And it is kind of odd to be talking about this because going through the entire game, I had nothing but a great time. I think some of these stages are some of the best we've ever seen out of a Sonic the Hedgehog game. City Escape might be the best Sonic the Hedgehog stage ever, right? But like playing through the game, going through it, I have to wonder, this game is deeply flawed. It's janky, it has weird voice acting. Like sometimes it feels like you go flying off the course. Sometimes there are things that make you wonder just why you're having such a great time. And I think that's a big reason why the game has developed such a reputation for being something that you enjoyed as a kid, but not now that you're older and have more sophisticated tastes. And as someone who didn't play this growing up, who I played a demo station of this and loved it when I was like what when I was younger, but I've never played it again after that. I do think the game is fantastic. It's interesting to think about it in this context. Going through like both stories, the Dark and Hero stories, like you really get a feel that like the creators had a lot of really crazy, out there, insane ideas. Like City Escape alone kind of demonstrates that. That jumping from a plane and landing onto the street, sliding down, like that's just the coolest thing ever, right? But it feels like very much like games like some of my favorite games, stuff like Super Mario 64 and what's another good example? The game has a lot of it's very front loaded when it comes to its content. Alexa, stop. I feel like the game peaks like immediately in in the hero side, right? Like that has all the best Sonic stages. It has the better treasure hunt stages, and the tail sections are just okay, right? You get a general idea for the plot. The plot is surprisingly good, by the way. Like, in spite of the wonky voice acting, I found myself really, really surprisingly invested in what was going on. The game made a lot of improvements over Sonic Adventure. Like, it got rid of the hub world in favor of like a linear story structure, and I think that was actually the right call to make. Like I really like Adventure. I think I actually prefer Adventure over this actually. But when all is said and done, I think that Adventure 2's really refined the concept. Like I do think making a lot of interesting stages and tying them together really was the way to go here. And the thing is, although that was an improvement, technically speaking, there are a lot of issues when it comes to Sonic Adventure 2. Specifically, the fact that the treasure hunt stages for Knuckles and especially Rouge are just the most boring, contrived, uh, too long things I've ever experienced in my life. Like Sonic games like kind of work because they're like fast-paced, fun, interesting, action platformers, right? Like, they don't play exactly like most other platforming franchises. Like Sonic actually has a lot of interesting aspects to him. And Knuckles in comparison is just there's nothing to this. Like all you're doing is wandering around an open area trying to find something. And it's just never fun. There is never a situation in which I would call like the treasure hunt situations fun. And they especially get bad in the Dark Side story, where you have to play as Rouge, because Rouge's stages, weirdly enough, are even worse because they're so gimmicky and they have so much like weird stuff going on. You have like a Super Mario Galaxy knockoff stage. You have one where she's robbing a bank. You have all these like one where like there's two different areas that you have to like rescue and then ride on a turtle to reach. It just makes no sense, honestly. As opposed to Knuckles, where you can just kind of wander around and figure it out. Like Rouges are just so gimmicky, it becomes even worse. It becomes like ridiculous. I just don't like that. In general, I would say the Dark Side story is a big step down from the hero side because the characters aren't as interesting. There aren't as many like there aren't as many like fun, unique speed stages, and Rouge's stages are gimmicky. Like in general, I would say like the dark side is gimmicky in nature. I just don't really enjoy that side of the story at all. I would say Eggman stages are a shade better than Tails, but that's just my opinion. I think the gimmicks actually benefit Eggman a lot more than Tails. I found a lot of Tails. There were a handful of Tails sections near the end that I just didn't really care for. So yeah, there are a lot of things to like complain about when it comes to this game, but like when I think back on it, when I think back to like that final Sonic stage on the hero side, when I think back to like City Escape, when I think back to like, I've played City Escape like legit 5 or 6 times already. It's probably been more than that, but like I legit have like gone to the stage select and played through City Escape more than once ever since I beat it. And it remains fun. It is like the peak of Sonic for a reason. And when you have like a stage that well constructed, when you have a stage that's iconic, that's so much fun to play, it's really hard to downplay like other aspects of the game, even if they're like nowhere near as good. Like I find myself really, really looking back on Sonic Adventure 2 because when you get right down to it, the speed stages in Sonic Adventure are better than a good chunk of like games that are out there. Like it actually does feel like this is what Sonic should be. An action-based franchise with like that takes itself and its plot like super seriously in spite of like the goofy cartoony nature of it. Like I found myself very, very surprised at how like seriously the plot took itself when it came to like, Shadow's motivations, trying to like realize a promise he made to a friend. You have like Tails wanting to like help out help Sonic out. Like you have like Sonic sacrificing himself towards the end. I was really surprised with how impactful that sequence was. It was like full of suspense. Like Sonic has a fake emerald. He goes up to Eggman with it, and he sees through his nonsense. And then he gets caught into like it's some kind of like space capsule, and then he gets thrown out into the into the atmosphere, and then it explodes. But he escapes using like chaos control, which is really interesting to think about. That Sonic is capable of using chaos control, but we never actually see him use it after this ever. I think, which is weird to think about. It's I don't know. I feel like better writers would have been able to like go somewhere after Sonic Adventure 2, but they didn't do anything. But like it's for what it is, like it's so weird because like the bot it's so weird how the bosses are some of the worst things I've ever experienced in this game. You have like both the hero side and the dark side paths take place like you just get different sides of the same story, but the characters do this thing where they fight each other at certain points, and no matter what happens, the character you're playing as wins. And it just kind of seems as like weird to me that like no matter what happens, the story plays out the same way. It's the same plot. It's just characters fight, and then like someone loses, but then things just end the same way. It's kind of a weird narrative choice, and I don't. It just feels like I don't know if you actually do beat someone in a fight, they wouldn't really be a threat to you later. It just feels like ugh. I don't know. There are like so many weird things you can talk about when it comes to Sonic Adventure too. You can talk about how like certain plot elements make no sense and how like and like the tone and like of course the voice acting, but like at the end of the day, in spite of like everything the game does wrong, and there is quite a lot, it's still a lot of fun. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from this is like, yeah, you could argue Sonic Adventure is dated. You could argue that like it was, other games have like better balance when it comes to level design. You can argue about like the multiple playable characters. You can like, You can like mention how like it's weird that Amy Rose is in the game at all. You can talk about like all of this stuff. You can talk about like, the treasure hunt stages. You can talk about like this or that. There's all these little things you can like talk about, but at the end of the day, the game is still fun. I mentioned earlier that like the jankiness is kind of off-putting. Like when you're playing as Sonic, like, jumping from rail to rail in that final stage, and like you're fighting like the jankiness in order to like land perfectly on the rails. Like you can't just jump and hit the circle button like it's like Sly Cooper or something. Sonic has to like jump down at full momentum and and land like exactly in this like particular small spot in order to start riding on the rail and then like move on to the next one. Like when you're in a situation like that, you really start to appreciate just how much fun the game can be. This is a skill-based speed platforming game. This is Sonic the Hedgehog. This is, I think, like the an example of what 3D Sonic could have been if it like stayed the course and like remained good, and if it didn't like try to reboot itself. It's Sonic '06, which is kind of curious to me. Like, why exactly did Sonic need to be rebooted? That's the thing I've come away from like looking back on this, because I don't have a problem with adventures. I like Sonic 1 and 2. Like early mid 2000 Sonic is actually pretty solid. So like looking at Sonic Adventure 3 and like looking at Sonic '06 and seeing everything they did there, why exactly did they go that route with it? Why didn't they just make Sonic Adventure 3? That's all anybody wanted, that's all anybody expected, and yet they keep doing this thing where they keep rebooting a franchise that just they keep rebooting a franchise that really didn't need to be rebooted. Like they really should have just stuck with the adventure formula. They really should have just like stuck with like making new interesting characters that have unique powers and abilities. And I think like Sonic Adventure 2 is really the last time we got to see that. I think Shadow and Rouge are actually fairly popular when it comes to like newer Sonic characters, especially Shadow. Everything after this, from Princess Elise to like uh, Chip to like all these like hated accessory Sonic characters. Like I think that's really what you should have like focused on, is making characters that feel like they could exist in Sonic's world. And we never really got that. We got like weird like amalgamations, like Final Fantasy's Princess Elise, or like Chip, who looks like he's a Disney Pixar character. Like they didn't do anything to like really evolve the formula or the gameplay, or the characters really. And I'm honestly like interested in seeing what Sonic Frontiers is like after playing this, because I've heard a lot of people like say that game is good. I haven't like bothered to play it. I expected it to be like complete trash, but like I don't know, maybe I might actually check it out at this point. We'll see. But yeah, you know, my impressions are that like Sonic Adventure 2 is fantastic. I really love everything about it. I think it's just a solid game, that a really good game that is held back by a number of like very glaring flaws.